In today's video, I'll be showing you the 10 different painting and drawing techniques that I used to create one of my own paintings. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel we do all things watercolor, as well as drawing tutorials, a little bit of mixed media, watercolor pencils, even some motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. Unlike many channels on YouTube, we are fully CAD approved. Now, I'm a big fan of planning, both when it comes to layout and when it comes to colours, but just occasionally I sort of go a bit off script, and I found a very small picture, a very small photograph of a spider's web. I suddenly had an idea of a painting, but it wasn't fully formed in my mind, so I decided just to go with it and just to really start the drawing, and not even to complete the drawing, to choose the colours as I went along. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be completely undisciplined with my colour choices, because you always want to limit to just a few colours within a painting so you get some cohesion. And it occurred to me that this was quite an interesting way to approach doing a painting, and that you might be interested to see perhaps some of the most important drawing and painting techniques that I did as I went through the painting. So let's get started. So I'm drawing a spider's web on this board of stretched paper, and in order to do the layout I scaled up the photograph so you can see this is a really big piece of paper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I scaled this up, and I'm going to use this smaller piece of paper here so that you can see it all on camera. So this method of scaling up works with any size picture. If you need to go up and make it bigger, what it's going to do is it's going to ensure that your paper is the exact same proportions, not size, but proportions as your photograph, so you can use it for landscape shapes, portrait shapes, going on to any shape of paper. So what do? We place this in a corner like so. You can tape it if you need to. All you need then is a ruler, a set square, even a piece of printer paper, something with a straight edge, and you're going to take a line from one corner through and out the other side. Now, it won't always come out of the side. It depends on the shapes of paper that you're using. It may come out of the bottom, but whichever way, you're going to have excess paper. So let me show you what I mean. So we'll remove this now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my square edge, my right angle. Again, you don't need a set square. A piece of printer paper will do. You just need something cut on a right angle, and we're going to go across from the point where we exited the paper. Now, if that point ended up being down here on the lower edge, you would take the line up this way vertically instead of horizontal. Basically what you've got is you've now got a piece of paper, this top part here, that is the exact same proportion as your photograph. This down here is excess. So if we want to make this photograph look exactly the same, we want to transfer everything across, we need to get rid of this. So we have options. You can just, if you're working on a notepad or something like that, you can just cut that piece of paper off. I like to use a piece of masking tape and put that across so that I realize that I'm just working in this area here. But there are also other options. In my particular painting, I want to keep the portrait shape. So I'm going to place my spider's web in this part, but I'm also going to use this part down here for something else. Whenever I show this method, some of you say to me, well, I want to get rid of that excess, that excess paper, that excess canvas, but I'm working on box canvas, I'm working on stretched paper. I can't just cut a slither off the side of my paper. What do I do? Now, in that case, what you'll want to do is you'll want to divide this area in half. So you would perhaps have half and half, and you could place one at the top and one at the bottom, work your measurements out, and then you can just extend those areas. So if it's something like a sky, if you're doing a landscape, you might just want to have a little bit more sky, a little bit more foreground. If it's a still life, you might just want to have, maybe needs a little bit more background on either side, and you just work it out in that manner. So that's what I did with my current painting, but rather than get rid of this bottom area, I've decided I'm going to use it. So here I am working on a very large painting. It's got a spider's web at the top, and not only am I choosing my colours as I go along, I'm kind of making the design as I go along. So I've decided that down the bottom of this painting, I want to do some leaf imprints in masking fluid. And what I'm going to do is, rather than just do them on white paper, so those imprints would come out white, which will be a bit stark, I want some really muted, pale, autumny colours. So I'm going to start as I often do. And if you need a formula to start choosing colours, then you want 3 primary colours, one of which should be a staining colour. But because I'm adding more colours into this later on, I'm not worried about whether one of my initial colours is a staining colour. So let's see what I've chosen. My initial thought was to use cerulean because I want some granulation, but I want it to be really delicate. But with a painting like this, sometimes it's good just to, scrabble around in the back of your cupboard and find that strange colour you had no idea what you were going to do with. Now, I was sent this sample by Jackmans Art Materials in the UK. So this is Cobalt Teal. And when I swatched it, kind of like cerulean, but more turquoise. And looking at the, I'm just looking at the pigment number. It could be a cerulean pigment, but cerulean and cobalt are quite related. But look at that, isn't it interesting? It's quite a similar colour to Daniel Smith manganese hue. So that's interesting. So we're going to use that one. I want a warm yellow, and then I decided let's go even further than yellow. Let's go for a Quinacridone gold. This one is Daniel Smith's. So here, look how beautiful this is. And when I add it into the blue, of course, I can make these lovely greens. Now, this may be too bright for areas of my painting. So let's think about how we mute this down. We add the 3rd primary in. I'm going to use my absolute favourite pink for mixing, which is Quinacridone Rose. This one is by Talens Rembrandt. It's a fabulous pink that's not too blue, it's not too yellow, it's just that real true mid-range pink, and it's fabulous for mixing. So we can make lilacs, and if we mix it in like this, we can end up with some beautiful muted greys and lilacs. Now, the next technique I'm going to use is some masking fluid. I'm actually going to use masking fluid 2 different ways in this painting, but this particular one, I'm going to actually place it on the spider's web. Now, if we look at the original photograph, it's got a lot of dew on or frost, and it's rather sort of bumpy and broken, which I'm going to try and replicate. I've got this embossing tool, which I'm going to use. It has a thick end and a thin end. And I've got some white masking fluid. Now, you can get coloured masking fluid, which certainly would show up better on camera, but unfortunately I have found sometimes it stains my paper, so I'm not going to risk that. I'm just going to be applying roughly where the pencil lines are. What should happen is when I remove the masking fluid later on, the pencil should come off too. But if I go off of the pencil, I'm not going to worry about that too much. Just ensures there'll be some nice white paper there. Now, if you haven't used this stuff before, make sure you watch my masking fluid mistakes video. And if you don't have an embossing tool like this, then I have actually done a video that shows 10 different masking fluid applicator tools, some of which you probably got in your house. And I'll link that one also in the video description if you would like to find out more about masking fluid. It's not the solution to all of your masking or white paper issues, but it is a useful tool in limited circumstances, and it's something I've chosen to use for this painting. So I'm on the lower part of my painting now, and I'm going to use some more masking fluid down here, but we're going to make some imprints. So I've got some of these leaf skeletons, and I particularly want to use these hydrangea heads. I'm not going to use them whole like this. I'll be chopping the little florets off to use individually. I've also got other folders of pressed leaves. Now, you can use fresh or dried leaves. It doesn't really make any difference. You want something that's got a little bit of texture to it. For example, whole leaves like this, they can be useful for some things, but they can also just leave you with, a flat blob where the whole thing is filled in, which doesn't look so good. Now, the downside to the ones that have a lot of sort of wiggly edges and filigree going on is that they can actually fall off and stick to your paper, and you can't take them off really until you've done the painting because you've still got the masking fluid on there. Oh, and we have a tiny snail shell here. I found this just now. There's nothing living in it actually. Make a nice addition to the picture, wouldn't it? Perhaps we'll paint a little snail shell in at the bottom. But first of all, I'm going to do these flower heads, and we're also going to do those at the top, and then I'm going to go down to some leaves sort of slightly lower down just to get the impression of foliage and stuff like that. Now there's two ways of doing this. You can take the little flower head and you can get an old paintbrush. You can paint on the actual masking fluid. I prefer just to get messy with my fingers. Honestly, whichever way you do this, it's going to be a horrific mess. Now, I've got some paper towel here and I've cut it into pieces because if you use whole sheets, you just find that, you end up getting through so many of them. So what we're going to do basically is put the masking fluid on the dried item, place it on, put this on top, press it hard, lift off. You have to do it quite quickly because obviously it all starts to stick. So let's use this one as an example. And what we need to do is put the masking fluid on, but we don't want it to fill in all of the gaps. So I'm going to dip it in like this and just get some masking fluid on it, and then just take a look at it and make sure there's not too much masking fluid on. Now that's too much because we've got no gaps left, so we need to sort of just take some off with our fingers, and we can use the paper towel as well, but don't remove it all. Okay, let's try that because we just have to be fast with this. I'm going to place it down on my paper, clean piece of tissue, and lift quickly off. I'm going to repeat that across the area. It's not something where we can be highly precise. It won't show up until we put the paint on, but you can get some really lovely effects. I'll try to avoid going on top of areas that I've already put masking fluid on, because what can happen is you can actually pull off the dried stuff when you're putting the fresh stuff on. So you want to try and move them around a bit. I'll also avoid getting them directly on top of the spider's web, which I've masked here, because again, that could pull off the first layer. At this point in the video, as always, can I ask you just to quickly press the like button, to press that thumbs up for me? It really helps the channel if you like, subscribe, share, or leave me a comment. It will help the algorithm to push my videos out to more people, enabling me to make more free videos for you. For my next technique, I'm going to get some crystal shapes by using this sea salt. I'm going to go in behind the spider's web with this new colour I've pulled out, which is Perylene Black Green shade. I've swatched it here. You can see how dark and moody it is. Towards the top, I'm also going to use this blue here so that we get a real idea of sort of dark undergrowth with some wintry icy sky colour. And while the paint is wet, I'm going to drop the salt crystals in. I'm not going to put them all over, just near the top of the painting. I'll start up here with a little clean water. You don't necessarily have to go on with water first, but I want the top to head towards lightness, so that'll just help that along. And now I'm going to start in with my turquoise colour. There we go, lots of splatters have gone on my paper, and we're not going to panic about that at all. Some have also gone down on the foreground, but you know what, I don't care at all because this is meant to be a botanical undergrowth painting, so any extra texture is going to be absolutely fine. Let's go in with some dark here as well, and I want to bring the dark over on the left hand side and more as I go down the painting. You see I'm on dry paper here, so I'm going to work quite quickly, and I'm not going to wait until this first area is dry. I'm going to start dropping the salt crystals in straight away. I will probably drip more paint on those in a minute. That will help them to work. So again, I'm going to start coming down here and getting some real darks. Masking fluid only works if there's a dark behind it. Sometimes people will say to me, oh, I tried that masking fluid, Michelle, and it just didn't work for me. It's usually that they just didn't go dark enough behind. You see how it starts to make this spider's web show up. Let's get some stronger blue here as well. I'm also going to drip some wetter paint here. Normally we wouldn't want this effect, but here I actually want some spreading and bleeding. I'm also trying to keep this edge down here moving so that we don't get a strange drying line, bringing these colours down lower. As I come down, I'm also going to place in some yellows so that we don't get a hard edge, and I'll also take some clean water along the bottom here where we overlap with that first area. I'm going to keep painting and dropping in my salt. The next technique I'm going to use in this painting is a simple wet into wet technique. We're going on dry paper, although this part up here is damp where I've been working on the top. I've got my hydrangea imprints, so I'm going to use some of this beautiful Perylene violet, particularly around the areas where I think there are flower shapes. Although they don't show on camera, I can see them a little bit by sort of tipping my head on one side and catching the light. I'm also going to work in with these other colours that I've been using, like so, to get some of these autumn shades appearing. Using a little of the Perylene violet as well, keeping this edge broken so that even if I do get some hard edges there. I decided to draw a little snail shell down here, simply because I found one earlier and I thought how nice it would look to have a little snail nestling in here. This one's alive, but he's asleep, which is why he's inside his shell. Picked up way too much paint there, but it's fine. We're not going to panic. We're just going to spread it around. Trying to work with Gimlet meowing at me now. He doesn't need anything. He's just an attention seeker. As I come down, I'll paint around that snail shell. So I'm still painting this lower area, but the next technique I'm going to use is some back runs or bleeding, sometimes called cauliflowers and blooms. We can make those on purpose by dripping either wet paint or clean water onto a damp area. Now, at this point in the video, it may seem just a second ago that I was doing this painting, although I think I might have been wearing a ring. It's actually been a whole weekend, and I don't like leaving masking fluid on for that long, but I took a trip to London, so there's that. Now, I'm going to do a technique next called ghost leaves. Now, you can see what the issue is up here. The only reason you can see the spider's web is because you can see the masking fluid and also some of the pencil. But once I remove that, there isn't actually anything, there's no paint around areas of this web up in this top corner or over here. And so unless I put some paint behind it, it's not going to show. Now, I could leave it as it is because what could happen is it could just look like it faded up into the light. But I'm not really a fan of less is more. I'm more a fan of more is more and then stick some more on it. So I'm actually going to do this technique called ghost leaves. So I'm going to put some leaves in this top corner. Now, I didn't invent this technique, but I did give it the name ghost leaves. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to put some leaves in that are cool, fairly transparent, all one shade. In other words, there's not going to be any detail on them, any leaf veins, any differences in colour. They're going to be almost silhouettes, and this automatically pushes things backwards. I often do this technique when I'm doing a vase of flowers, so we have these very sort of flat leaves behind some of the others. It'll give a feeling of depth. I've been playing around with some colour mixes here. I started with the blue and the yellow and a little bit of the Perylene black. It's separating in some lovely ways here. Now, I don't want to try and draw leaves on here because I've still got masking fluid on. I'm just going to literally be brave and paint them freehand. I've mixed a whole dish of colour here. Now, some of these colours are obviously granulating because you'll see as I stir this, there's some colour change going on. So in order to get that flat uniformity, I will need to stir each time I dip my brush in. And I'm literally just going to freehand paint some sort of long shaped leaves, various sizes, and just put them in where I feel like having them. I'm going to avoid the salt crystals in as far as I can. I can't really get those off without removing the masking fluid, and I want to put the leaves in first, and I want them to be crisp and flat like this, so I'm going to kind of go round the salt. But luckily in this area here and over here there isn't much salt, so ghost leaves is what I'm doing next. So the next technique I'm going to use is working in with watercolor pencils. Now, I want to stick to my limited palette, but I haven't quite got the right yellow here. So, I mean, it's not a bad yellow, but what I might do actually is add a little white to this shell because there is actually some white on it. Now, the amusing thing is that the reference photo is on my phone and I'm filming with my phone. So I've had to kind of draw a little picture to remind me where the stripes go. So let's have a look at that. And what I'm going to do is just use this watercolor pencil into damp paint to take some of these stripes in. And there's still some masking fluid going across this picture as well. I'm not at all worried about that, but I am shortly going to take a little walk, allow this all to dry, and then I'm going to take the masking fluid off before I show you the final technique. So the masking fluid is off now. I'll show you a little bit of the picture. Now, of course, it's too big to fit on camera with the camera this low. I will put up the full picture at the end and show you how it looks. It'll also be in my Facebook group and probably over on Instagram as well. The last technique I'm going to use on this picture, because we have lost a little bit of the vibrancies. These have gone lighter, but we've also lost some of the vibrancy just by rubbing. The background has gone a little lighter in places. I'm going to do some negative painting. So I've got these kind of nice shapes have appeared here. So what I'm looking to do now is to ramp up the contrast and go behind some of these areas. And also I've got some areas here where I can go perhaps behind some of these flower shapes and make them a bit stronger. I want to work a little bit more on my snail shell, make it a bit more contrasty. You can see here in the spider's web, for fun, I actually picked out a few squares and kind of added to them. I could actually just ramp up the contrast there. That was almost like negative painting, but of course I still had the masking fluid on at the time, so I didn't have to be too careful. But there's no reason why I can't go in with a brush now and strengthen some of these. And I might look to do that as well in the center of the web there. I mean, there are areas, you know, where we have such beautiful things going on that I'm absolutely not going to touch them. But then there are also areas lower down where I do feel I may want to go behind some areas and just get more strength of color and contrast going on. Whether that's abstract shapes or actually picking out leaves, I can go around and on top of certain areas, and I'm working on dry paper now. And will do so, you know, I may blend out the odd edge here and there, but I will pretty much continue working on dry paper now for the rest of this painting. Picking out some of those negative shapes to bring those light areas forwards, either just blocking in some color or making leaf shapes perhaps, or just pattern so that we bring up the contrast. Do let me know in the comments what you found most useful about this video. And before you leave this video, don't forget to have a look in the YouTube video description. That's going to tell you any videos that I spoke about in this video, any materials that I used. It's also got some free stuff down there for you. You can download some free PDFs. There's even a free course that you can take. And if you enjoyed this watercolor painting video, I think you're going to enjoy one of my most popular videos. You can watch that one right now.